Last year, we all know in February of last year, Cyclone Gabrielle ripped through the North Island and particularly ravaged the regions of Gisborne, Tairāwhiti and the Hawke's Bay. It was the worst natural disaster, as I understand, the first worst weather disaster. I'm trying to remember if you should do comparisons, but probably since Wahine in 68. Although I don't, and I'm sorry, but you know what? I mean, it's appalling. I actually don't know the total number of fatalities as a result of the death, whether it was worse than White Island or whatever. It doesn't matter. It caused enormous damage, death, destruction across regions that I think most New Zealanders would regard as sort of holiday destinations or retirement destinations, beautiful places of the world anyhow. They certainly weren't last February. During the event itself, and certainly in the immediate aftermath of Cyclone Gabrielle, it became significantly apparent that the people who were being affected, who were being flooded, who were in danger of losing their lives, who lost their lives and their livelihoods in certain cases, that they, in actual fact, what's the best word to describe it, were on their own, that help didn't come, and that they were bitter and resentful at the time and angry at the lack of adequate warnings and the lack of an adequate response from people they expected to, in actual fact, help in exactly these kind of emergency situations. Yesterday, the independent review into the emergency response to Cyclone Gabrielle was released, and that was led by former Police Commissioner Mike Bush. And as a consequence of that, the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, who would appear to be the sort of national organisation that overlook civil defence in this country, although civil defence generally tends to be regionally organised, have received the report and now say that looking at it. Many Hawke's Bay residents, though, interviewed in the last 24 hours, apparently remain unconvinced whether this report will actually amount to any meaningful change and whether or not it goes far enough. Joining us to talk about that is one of the councillors who was very strong on this issue before Cyclone Gabrielle and the lack of proper preparedness for just such an emergency, Councillor Neil Kirton from the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, the Napier Ward, I think, and he joins us now. Neil, great to have you on. Thanks very much for joining us, mate.
Yeah, greetings, Michael. Nice to talk to you.
I guess it would have been received, your regional council would have received the report. You would have had the opportunity to look at it as well?
No, not until 2:30, as of 2:30 yesterday, Michael. That was a little disappointing from my perspective, but that's the way it was.
You're joking?
You know, no preemption on as to content, so just catching up and looking at it really last night and this morning.
The report has been summarised in some media reports that I've said, and I haven't seen the whole report, obviously, either, Neil. Mind you, you're elected to look at it, and it's your responsibility. You would have thought they would have given you the heads up, but there you go. Regional councils. But the thing, Neil, is that two things come out from that. One is that the suggestion is that the civil defence personnel in Hawke's Bay had an optimistic scenario. And the second is that they were simply overwhelmed by the event and unable to respond. Do either of those conclusions fit easily with you?
Yes, they do. All of those conclusions around the level of preparedness, the optimism, the overconfidence of the organisation itself, really, they are accurate descriptions. I find, though, that the report in itself is somewhat underwhelming in terms of its conclusions about the entire organisation and the structure thereof. It really does go gentle on the governance of it, and comments such as that the organisation had a history of working effectively. I'm just there's not a lot of evidence for that, and I really wonder whether the inquiry looked at some of the documents, for example, the capability assessment report in June 2019, and then a further report after the Napier floods in 2020, which were really scathing of the structure, planning, and preparedness. And so I'm surprised that the entity as a whole, including its governors, got off so lightly, and the staff involved, etc., was somewhat thrown under the bus on their own. So they are my early impressions of reading through the document.
The thing that amazed me, and I remember I'm a long way from this, Neil, and I'm just relying upon mainstream media reports for it. But there was a report that came out, oh gosh, it must have been almost during the emergency, that the person who was in charge of civil defence was hiking somewhere in South Island or somewhere like that on leave and couldn't be immediately contacted. Was that finalised or discussed or confirmed in yesterday's report?
Well, not so much in the report itself. It really did steer clear of identifying any, and I think appropriately, of identifying individuals. And yes, I can confirm that was the case. But therein lies the issue. It shouldn't rely on one individual hiking down the South Island to function correctly. That if it does rely on that, then we're in real trouble. We need to go to the core of the issue, and that is the level of preparedness, the preparation that goes on. And that's where my big issue is, that, and I've been singing the song for some time, is that the civil defence entity in this region had plans and had processes in play to explore, to identify hazards and to deal with them. Well, they just didn't do that, and the report unfortunately doesn't go and delve into those various reports, which ought to have really shown the inadequacies that are there and highlighted what needs to happen next. So in short answer to your question, yes, the individual concerned may not have been present, but in my view that doesn't matter. The structure itself was broken and was inadequately prepared for this sort of event, or even a much lesser event had that occurred.
I'm always stunned though, Neil, by when you've got red and you've got a warning from Met Service and NIWA, and that there is a major event underway, and you're given actually plenty of time to know there's one, that it isn't all hands to the deck just quietly.
Oh, look, you're absolutely correct. The warning signs were clearly there, well forecast, and we simply didn't respond quickly enough to in the circumstances. And I get back to, if you like, the structures and processes in play which were poorly implemented. You read documents which talk about the level of urgency needed, but that simply didn't occur. And you get down to, in my view, a failing from top to bottom, where your governors have taken little interest. There's been poor oversight, poor accountability, and we've simply ended up with a if you like, a lazy organisation, not prepared and ill prepared to meet the challenges in front of it.
When you talk governors, are you talking the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, or are you also talking the Napier and Hastings councils as well?
Well, they're all party to this, and this is part of the problem, in my view, that we had the whole model itself, where you disperse accountability across, in this case, 4 territorial authorities and 1 regional council, and everyone's in charge, but no one's in charge. You end up with, you get what you get, and that's a mess. And that's my view here. No politicians are accountable, and it's my knowledge that they really didn't have a good understanding of what was at play, what those plans meant, what their job was in terms of implementing plans and responding to various reports which highlighted inadequacies. And that accountability simply is not there, and I just don't accept the findings of the report, the review in this case, that those relationships, that governance was effective. In my view, it was a mission to fail from the get-go back in 2016, and I said so at that time. time, a vote 8 to 4 and 1 against around council, not accepting the model because it was clearly lacking accountability, and when the push came to shove, those politicians involved just weren't in a position to stand up and be counted.
Now, and this is where the worrisome part is for me today. Now, as you know, I sit on a regional council, not entirely dissimilar to Hawke's Bay in terms of that fractured command. There are many other regions, Bay of Plenty, Taranaki, Wanganui, Manawatu, Wellington, where again you've got an overlay of regional council and district and city councils. Theoretically, the regional councils are in charge of civil defence, but they usually have staff sitting in each of those other councils, theoretically preparing themselves for responsibility in their area. Are you worried that tomorrow, Neil, or next month, or next year, you could find exactly the same sort of weather event in New Zealand and get exactly the same sort of non-response?
Well, precisely. That's my view. In fact, that the structure, and you've got councils really under financial stress at the moment, forming their budgets, etc. Well, one of those items that tend to fall by the wayside, and that's certainly true in the Hawke's Bay setting, is that every council, every TA, simply dropped the ball in terms of their responsibilities. They had the obligation under the law to ensure their emergency response was there at a local level, a TA level, and when you looked more closely, those structures, that capacity was simply not there, or very ill thought out. So if we don't change that model, that level of accountability is simply not there. The politicians elected to govern that simply do not have a line of sight on it, and therefore cannot, if you like, exert their accountability in the circumstances.